All right.
We're live.
Hey, everyone. This is Ryan Weber. Welcome to the misec Lansing Community, the intro to cloud security. Since we have kind of a small set of group here in person, I'll just keep the camera off for now because we all know that we have unlimited bandwidth, so might as well conserve some, especially because I'm on a laptop. You just never know, so I'd rather not blow it up. So the first thing I like to just say is just kind of check these memes out. That's kind of how I portray it to my team. Cloud security is a buzzword. It is a thing. It is something that people want to do, but they don't really necessarily know what it is. So that's kind of what this, overview will kind of be. So we'll just kind of dive into it. Just as a disclaimer, my slides kind of have a lot of information on them because they're kind of geared toward students. I teach this course at EMU currently, Intro to Cloud Security, and it's kind of geared towards them. So really the thought process, without reading all of this, which this will be recorded, so you can always go back to it. But really the thought process behind this is really to give you a lot of information, have some prompts to either ask myself questions or other people in the room, simply because it's hard to know everything. But this is kind of what I've learned over the years, and just trying to lead a team of engineers to try to do this every day. So a little bit about me. It's kind of a blurb again, because I like to give people a lot of information to kind of consume at their own leisure. I have a pretty loaded schedule, just, kind of a career set. I'm originally from Jackson. I live in the Lansing area though. However, I've been a Spartan fan my whole life, never had the opportunity to go here. Now I go here. I have one more semester, which is really cool for me. Kind of a personal dream of mine. But like many of you, my starting career did not start there. I started at Jackson College, kind of worked my way up through master's level up to Eastern, and now I'm at the MSU level with the graduate certificate. I'd highly recommend it. Actually, it's been really valuable in my career every day to kind of think how extremists kind of go about their day, whether it's right or left, whatever political spectrum that you fall under. I'm also a adjunct professor at EMU. I've been doing that for about 4 years, doing cloud security, cloud computing courses. I enjoy it immensely. I'll kind of say the same thing to you guys that I say to them is I'm not here for the money. I'm here to actually present things that I think I know and I may know, but I want to kind of validate that. So I think that's really important for everyone out there to just try something new, try to invent yourself, try to build a hands-on course, which is what I've done. It's actually gotten national attention. As with most things, national attention is relative because it really depends on who's broadcasting the story. But at the end of the day, it was actually really cool to see that. All of my faculty and myself, just being a lonely adjunct, got recognition for the courses that we were building. And this is kind of a week one kind of thought process that I kind of go through with my students. That's kind of what this is going to be. So I have about 15 years of total cybersecurity experience in general. So I started off at, doing remote. I worked at MyHand there. The logo's on the right. I worked at FCA for a stint. I worked at Duo. I'm actually a contractor for Adjunct Security as well. And then I work at Cisco leading a team of security engineers doing cloud security engineering. I love it. I think it's interesting. As with everything, it's still a job. It's still something I have to deal with. I'm stressed about it, but it's still a lot of fun to be able to work on that kind of stuff every day. Got a lot of certifications, like a lot of you, or maybe some of you don't have any at all, and that's totally okay. AWS, Cisco, HashiCorp, NSA, DoD, Windows, CompTIA, and others. Just keep learning. That's really what these are supposed to be. And the reason I wanted to come out today is just kind of, try to brighten the Lansing community because, I live here and I truly want to see this area grow since I'm trying to become more involved in it as years go by. And I actually have a use case that we did with MyHand with a state-of-the-art environment that we built for MyHand in East Lansing. So that was kind of cool as well to be a part of that team. So we'll just kind of start out basic. What is cloud computing? Without reading all of this, again, I put a lot of information. It's more prompts for me. But really, cloud computing is really a way that you can do on-demand delivery of compute, power, database, storage, whatever you want to be, and just pay as you go. In layman's terms, that just means that When you consume it, you pay for it. I won't go too much more into that because, again, that's really just the high level stuff that you need to know. Types of cloud computing. Again, cloud computing is a relative term because technically cloud environments, and I'm doing quotes in the room right now, because there are private clouds, public clouds, private cloud services, hybrid clouds. There's all types of different clouds. The one that I'm specifically dealing with every day is hybrid clouds, sort of. But my team really deals with public clouds like Amazon, Azure, GCP, stuff like that, which are really the main players in infrastructure as service, SaaS as a service, which, again, these are types of offerings that are always and forever going to be pay as you go. They're going to be subscription models. They're going to be things that are scalable in nature. They're never going to be, here's a cost, this is how much it costs, and then you have to pay that cost again in bulk. That's really not how AWS, Azure, and GCP run their business. And honestly, it's changed the game for really any of us, where any of us could build a huge company, a huge process, a huge service with very little upfront capital, which I think is really what cloud computing is supposed to do. I also teach a cloud computing course at EMU as well, just advanced cloud computing techniques that go into more hands-on depth roles, hands-on labs, stuff like that. So we'll get kind of the meat of this presentation is what is cloud security. This is from McAfee. Normally, I don't really like McAfee, to be honest, but they had a really good understanding of what cloud security was, just at a basic level. Because for me, I explain to my team the same way I'll explain it to you. I want something simple, quick, effective, repeatable. If it's none of those things, if it doesn't fall into all of those things, I don't want it for my team. Kind of like when teams come to me and say, hey, Ryan, we want to build this thing. We want to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, is it a SaaS product? No, it's a on-premise. Okay, I don't want it. That's really what it comes down to, because it complexes things. It makes it unmanageable. It makes it unrepeatable, and especially scalable. It always becomes a problem. So really at a high level, cloud security involves a procedure and technologies that secure cloud computing environments against both external and insider cybersecurity threats, which is really similar to what security in general is you're protecting assets from internal and external hackers or malicious actors or insider threats or whatever you want to call them. The way I kind of broke it down for my class is really cloud security disciplines. There's a lot more than this, but these are the main ones that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. I would say from these, governance and identity is the biggest problem that I deal with literally every single day. I want to pull my hair out. It literally makes no sense on the reasons that businesses, big and small, make decisions in the cloud without really truly understanding how scalable or repeatable it actually is. Because just because someone knows how to do something doesn't mean that you should just push it through and get the business done. So again, these are really the biggest ones: data security, availability, compliance, DR, BC planning, governance, and identity. I would say identity is the most important because if you don't know who's doing it, you can't have a proper audit trail, and you will fail everything when it comes to governance and compliance and risk, which especially for larger businesses where I work, like Cisco, that is a big no-no. To kind of elaborate more on that, I built this slide because it kind of breaks things down a little bit more. So cloud security is complicated, like anything. If you're an expert in it, I sometimes pretend that I am, but I'm still learning every single day. But what does it all mean? In cloud security, you must understand that each discipline has its place, and you must be used in controlling of cloud environments. Those include, but not limited to. So again, this kind of goes a little bit more in depth to it. It makes you understand at least a high level of what each of these mean. Like I said, governance and identity is really who's doing what, how they're doing it. Is it best practice based on the public cloud, like Amazon? Amazon has various standards like CIS benchmarks, which are essentially best practices. But again, they don't always relate to specific environments. Like Cisco, we have FedRAMP environments. We have, commercial grade. Like Duo, for example, has federal and commercial offerings. That's all public knowledge, right? These are all things that it may look the same on the outside, but it's completely different how data traverses, how the availability is, if there's compliance requirements, what's the planning of DRBC, how do these things kind of kind of interchange each other. And I bring this part up right here as well as, in information security, you touch each part of the entire process from end users to a global application rollout. That is kind of a tongue-tied, kind of long way of saying you touch everything. When a user logs in, you touch that. When a user does something in your application, you touch that. You may not build it, but you oversee it. You are the one that's ultimately responsible for it. A lot of places, like they have the CISO that would technically take the fall. But at the end of the day, if you're not building something that's worth anything or anything that's really, just out of the box makes sense, where it's repeatable, again, simple, easy to follow, I don't want it for my team. I probably would. I think I'll go into this video. Hopefully video comes through this, but I can't really talk about cloud security without mentioning Terraform. This is something that I've got a certification on. I love the technology, but I'm just starting to learn it. We built MVPs, we built POCs on this stuff, and now we're using it. We've invested a lot of money into it, and it's just a really, really good neutral tool, which is really what my team is trying to build, neutral tools to manage everything, to build it the first time the right way. It's just something that we have to kind of mention. So I'm going to play this video. Hopefully it'll play. Hopefully we don't get an ad, which I'm sure we'll get an ad. Oh, look at that. We didn't get an ad.
As code tool that can provision resources in the cloud from simple declarative code. When building an app in the cloud, you may find yourself using the graphical user interface of your favorite cloud provider, clicking on buttons and paying for products just like you would on an e-commerce site. The only drawback of this approach is that it's complete and total chaos. You might click 1,000 different buttons to get your VM configured properly, but what happens when you need to reproduce the same thing again in the future? Terraform provides a way to build, change, and version infrastructure safely and efficiently by representing your infrastructure and all of its settings with the HashiCorp configuration language or optionally JSON. Think of it like a human-readable blueprint that can execute and automate everything you do in the cloud. It's free and open source, and the first step to get started is to install the CLI on your local system. Then from your project, create a file ending in .tf. At the top, we have a Terraform block that controls global settings for Terraform itself. Most importantly, we can define providers here, which are like plugins that can connect to different cloud providers like AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, etc. Below that, we have a provider block, which gives Terraform the necessary credentials to connect to our Google Cloud account. From there, we can create actual cloud infrastructure using a resource block. It takes a type as its first argument, which corresponds to a product on Google Cloud, then a custom name to identify it as the second argument. Inside the block, we can customize the settings of the resource, like its machine type, zone, and anything else you can imagine. Now that our infrastructure is defined as code, we can run Terraform init to initialize the project, then Terraform apply to make the actual changes to Google Cloud. It'll require a confirmation before making the changes. Then after it's complete, the Terraform show command can be used to inspect the current state of the infrastructure. What's awesome is that as we add more resources to the configuration, Terraform keeps track of the changes or diff, similar to a version control system like Git. Just run Terraform apply again to deploy any changes to the configuration. Now, once your startup has failed and it comes time to tear down the project, use the Terraform destroy command as the inverse of apply to delete everything in your configuration file. This has been infrastructure as code with Terraform in 100 seconds. Make sure to hit the like.
So I'm sure all of you are like, what? But again, I have to mention Terraform. Terraform has completely changed the way that we deploy things. However, it's built an entire method that cloud security engineers like myself and my team have to deal with, where if you don't know Terraform and you have hundreds of developers that are deploying infrastructure all of the time, and it's not being checked and it's not being versioned properly, it's not being managed, it's not being deleted, there's so many other variations. But really what this is supposed to do is to build some type of standard of how folks are building things, instead of just clicking buttons, not having audit trails, not having things enabled in every AWS account or Azure account or GCP account, to where like you have basic auditing, you have an IAM user, or it's tied to AD. Like there's so many different variations that HashiCorp Terraform can help you with. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, just deploying a resource and managing it. That's just one part of it. So any questions on that? Just wanted to give anyone just a quick question. Anyone on the chat here? I can't see anything.
I heard something.
So did I.
It's like maybe unrelated sound.
I don't got any chats currently on the YouTube
I
channel.
might have a question for you at the end here about some of this.
Sure. So yeah, we'll. I'm just looking real quick. You see anything, Nick? I assume not. Okay, cool. So I just, and again, this is kind of following my same kind of, EMU model where I'm trying to teach it as like no one knows anything. So really, and again, it's an intro. So I want to kind of give everyone a lot of information to digest and kind of take to others. So this is kind of the map that I see it today. There are others where I look at it and I'm like, oh, I forgot Salesforce. That's another one that's kind of a big thing. But these are the ones on the left are the big ones that really people think about when they think of public cloud. AWS is the big kahuna. It's the big mammoth. It's, I've worked in them all except Alibaba. I don't know. I think that's more of a Chinese specific, but it still is used around the world for multiple, avenues and use cases. A lot of enterprises use Azure. I know MSU uses that. EMU uses that. Duo uses everyone uses some type of Azure, I think, at this point, simply because it's a way to manage identities and then use other forms of identity like SailPoint and Ping and Duo. And again, there's a lot of really good use cases for Azure. Google is really for those developers that just need a box to play with and mess with. And really a lot of data driven. Obviously, Google makes their money on data. So really, they're really good driven Google platform. AWS is really where I started simply because I'm more of a sysadmin. That's kind of where I started. And really, AWS assumes that you kind of have a lot of background with sysadmin work, whether it's network engineering or, AD configuration, because they hold a lot of the same kind of technologies around that. But I've enjoyed all of these. I'm really not particular to one. I would say the easiest one to learn to where you can kind of use the other ones is AWS. If you learn AWS, you can pretty much click your way through the other ones, which again isn't necessarily the best way to do it. But at the same time, you'll still kind of learn overviews. You'll understand kind of the thought process behind these other platforms. IBM, Google, Azure, Oracle, DigitalOcean, Rackspace, they all kind of follow that same AWS initial model, and they all kind of rely on each other. Like Apple, for example, is not on here, but like Apple relies on AWS for all of their images, even though they always say they don't like each other. AWS is a very big proponent of a lot of Fortune 500 companies, including Cisco, including, I'm sure, MSU. I'm sure there's a bunch of use cases for many different types of companies and different industries, just simply because, they have the functions, they have the market share, and they have the use cases. So I just pulled this one up too. You can kind of see that Amazon still leads the pack, but Azure's gained a lot of strength. Last time I knew, in 2020, Amazon had about 50% market share. So you can kind of see that Azure is catching up. Kind of what I was saying, that Azure really is going towards those enterprise customers, especially EDUs. As is my time at Duo, they were really pushing EDUs for, moving their, AD infrastructure to Azure AD and moving away from Duo or other products, simply because, they knew they could do that. And honestly, it's a very good product. So you can kind of see there's Salesforce. There's another cloud I've never heard of, Tencent cloud. I've never heard of that. But again, all use cases, all valid. The one question, I've worked at pretty siloed companies as well, where, they initially said, we're not going to move to the cloud. There's too many risks. There's too many of this. There's too many of that. Is there a risk? Absolutely. The ones that I've seen in my career, I've been doing it for about 8 years in that specific space, is that, the downside is visibility. Literally anyone, probably even everyone's parents, could go in and create something in AWS and not know what they did out of the box. Like, that's how easy it could be. If you show them, here's how you click a button, here's how you deploy something, they could probably do it. So you can kind of see that really anyone can do it. It's easy to pick up. It's easy to test. And sometimes you lose track about what people are doing and how they're doing it and how they're managing it. Hence why Terraform is a really good way to manage those things. Accountability with users and users of the cloud environment, build and secure later. So one thing that's been detrimental to cloud and the mistrust of it is that companies say, okay, we're going to go to the cloud. We're gonna spend very little money getting it there. We're going to save the company millions of dollars. We're going to cut budgets. We're going to downsize people. We're going to do all these great things. But that means that they're going to take whatever they have, whatever application, whatever use case they have, and just like they call it lift and shift. They just take the application, package it up, throw it in the cloud, and then they say, look, it works. But it works in the same exact way in AD. It works the same way with their web application firewalls. It works with the same technologies, but now it's in the cloud. But the point of the cloud is not to do that necessarily. That is an easy win. That's an easy cost saving initially. But the issue with that is then you have technical debt, which technical debt will get to the point where you have all of this stuff in the cloud where you're trying to manage it in more of an on-premise way. And AWS is saying, well, why aren't you using our services? Why aren't you using this service to cut the cost of this one? But then you have to realize you have to refactor that in a lot of ways. So really what it comes down to is, how do we get companies to realize don't lift and shift, take your time, migrate when you need to. So then you have preferred security and cloud security type environments that are built right from the get-go. But that's a hard business decision. A lot of it's driven by budgets. It's driven by, the next PR stunt, I guess you could say. It's driven by a lot of things. And then you kind of come down to, again, it can be more than the on-premise. If you lift and shift a model or an application or a use case, and you don't migrate it to a cloud-provided service, a lot of times that will be more or less cost-effective in the long run. So it might be cost-effective for 6 months, but if you have a technology that, let's say you're running XP, God forbid, in a cloud, and you migrate those VMs, which I've seen companies do that where they migrate an unsupported version. Now you have extremely vulnerable technology in the cloud, and who's going to support that? Microsoft's not going to support that. You're going to have to pay an insurmountable money to migrate that application from like an NT process to a modern day system. And Amazon's not going to help you with that. Azure's, Microsoft's not going to help you. Google's not going to help you. They might help you, but it's going to cost you more for that support. So what I'm trying to say is then you'll end up on bullet point, number 4 here, where misconfigurations can expose company resources very easily, such as AWS S3. So AWS S3 bucket, really just think of it as a Dropbox or a place to put files. If you do it wrong, you're exposed. And a lot of folks are like, well, Amazon's insecure or, stuff like that. It has nothing to do with Amazon. There's a shared responsibility model where they're not responsible for if you misconfigure something, right? And that's really the misconception. And again, there's a couple examples which I won't go through, but again, it's not Amazon's fault necessarily, unless they have some type of exploit. But in the past, it's never been because of a provider; it's been because of human error, which again, hence is Terraform and other kind of Git management systems. So I'll go through this quickly. I just wanted to just kind of, just talk about specifically a couple of the clouds. The big three, I guess you could say. AWS was founded in 2002 originally, and then relaunched in 2006. They had a couple big services, including EC2, S3, and SQS, which, EC2 is just a virtual machine. S3 is, like I said, just kind of a bucket, kind of like Dropbox, really. And then SQS is really for queuing. So think of like messages that you need to be sent out to something, or you need to, push an email, something that's really kind of what it was for. But there is a specific service for email as well in AWS. And then, so, AWS is obviously Amazon Web Services. There's a lot of proven services like EC2. It's one of the most robust. It still goes down, right? Things still happen with it. But, help high-profile customers such as, Federal, State, Netflix, Epic Games, Hulu, Disney+, GE, NFL, and many others, they rely on it. So they have to be doing something right, whether, and I always strive this to students because I've had students where they say, well, I don't like Amazon, or I don't like Microsoft, or I don't like Google. And that's a personal opinion, and I'm totally okay with that. I just think that for what we do and the technology that you want to become, you don't want to be tied to a specific vendor. Like for me, I started with Cisco equipment, and I work at Cisco now. Do I use Cisco equipment every day? No. Do I think it's the best solution for everything? No. And my managers would support me simply because at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're making the best decision for the customers and for what we're trying to do. And Amazon has a lot of great services, but you can see that that specific person, Mr. Bezos, is getting extremely rich every single day because he's great. He's created really great services that a lot of us rely on. You may not realize that you do until you're like, hey, I don't have that anymore. And that's because the AWS is down, which is very rare, where there's an actual outage of something for more than a couple hours, I would say. And I don't think recently, like I said, the last biggest outage I saw was from Apple.com, and that was because of all of the images that Apple had. They were all stored in S3 buckets, which again, they didn't configure their S3 buckets right to be in different regions. So they literally had a misconfiguration on their end, right? So again, there's a lot of extensive training, a lot of resources. I can always give you some of those resources that I've done to take tests from Amazon and pass them. And it's just really fun to learn, and one of the best platforms to learn and grow with. So this is kind of the cloud shared responsibility model. The reason I bring this up for cloud security is because this is literally paramount to how you should really architect for the future. Because again, AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud, right? So they're responsible for the physical protection of all of these things, right? The hardware, the global infrastructure, the regions, the compute, storage, databases, networking, right? But if you're a customer and you're on the customer side, which is security in the cloud, and you deploy a database in the cloud and you open it up to the world, that has nothing to do with Amazon. They're going to go, okay, cool, right? They're just going to look at you and just go, okay, well, we'll try to help you, but it's going to cost you this much, right? To kind of shut that down. So, and again, I've worked with AWS ProServe, and they really know what they're doing. They know what they're doing with their services. But a lot of times they make decisions for AWS, right? What's the best way to build in AWS? Not necessarily for your use case. So you have to be careful with AWS ProServe as well. And that's just been my experience with them. That's with any vendor, right? You have to make decisions based on your own needs for your company, and not the company that says, hey, you should use this service through us because it's the best. Not necessarily. Even with Cisco. Like Cisco, we have a lot of great products. But at the same time, like I've used Palo Altos and other roles that do better things, right? So it really just depends on where you are, what kind of, what clients you're trying to suffice, and really what you're trying to protect is really what's important for cloud security. Do not be stuck on one vendor, or you'll be in trouble. So again, I kind of mentioned this. I won't go through all this again. It's just kind of there, but just kind of stare at the bottom right picture. This is directly from Amazon. And again, it makes perfect sense. Like for 0 months, you're going to spend that much. For half a year, I think that's what they mean by that. You're going to spend that much. For a year, for these are like renewal contracts. But with AWS, you're always going to kind of fluctuate based on based on the pay-as-you-go model, or PAG, which is what it is. So like on-demand, spot instances, reservation instances, savings plan, dedicated host. I won't go all into that. If you want to know more about it, let me know. But yeah, the reason that cloud is selling is because there's no upfront cost. The most I've ever spent, and I've done labs, I've done stuff for EMU, I've done stuff for customers, I've done stuff, and I've only paid maybe 30 or 40 bucks out of my own pocket, like ever in a month. So I mean, it's really, really cost effective. You can do a lot of cool things with really no money, which I think is all good. And I added this slide late the other day because I think it was important to just mention this. What does Cloud Security Protect or secure, right? We talked about it kind of does the entire life cycle of an application, but like, what is it supposed to protect, right? It's supposed to protect mobile, off-net devices, enterprise devices. These are things that you connect into a SaaS platform, an IaaS or a PaaS, which is IaaS is infrastructure as a service, PaaS is platform as a service, or software as a service, or the private like VMware, right? And then you have this data management and visibility plane. So I'm not gonna read the top, but you can read it if you want. But really, what I think of it is it's a console, right? It's a visual GUI that says, here, click this button, do this thing, or APIs, right? Everything in AWS is great because there's such simple APIs where you can interact with them. You can know what people are doing within a CloudTrail log, which is easy to get the logs for, which CloudTrail is a service through AWS that says, okay, Ryan is coming in, he's clicking on this button, and he's doing this thing. Simple as that. How do you protect that, right? How do you protect this thing? And it really starts with auditing, starts with identity, as I said. It starts with just understanding what people are trying to do and make it to where if someone comes in to your environment, to your AWS account or Azure account or GCP, you know that Ryan did X thing. Even though Ryan is at X level or he's a security admin, he should still be under the same scrutiny as everyone else. I've always been a big proponent of that. We have that issue. I've had that issue with current role, other roles where people are like, well, I need admin role or I need this or I need that. And it's like, well, I get it, but we're security. We have to be involved in everything that you do. And that's not saying we're excluded. We have to do the same thing you do. We may not be experts in your development process, but we have to do what you do and understand it. Because again, APIs and exposed infrastructure is really what's going to breach a business, and you're going to be on the front page, which you don't want to be. I won't go into that because I kind of went through that. I'll kind of go. So this kind of goes a little bit more in depth. How do we secure management plane? Right, management plane is, as I said, I see it as the console APIs. There are other definitions of management plane, but again, as I've kind of taught cloud security for a while, I really want to keep things simple and not think of the definition. I want to think of like what it means to you, like what it means to me. Management plane, boom, console APIs for AWS, Azure, GCP, whatever it is. So at the end of the day, the things that I've seen in my career so far is, account inventory. Biggest problem in cloud environments. What's your inventory? What does it look like? There's some really good tools I'd recommend. I'm going to say this one, Wiz.io, one of the best freaking tools I've ever seen in a very long time. It's a tool that literally takes inventory of everything and all the APIs and everything. That literally has changed the game for my team, because now we can say, look, developer, you're doing this wrong in this way. And why do you keep doing this? And before it was really like, put it into a SIM, build a dashboard like Splunk or something. And it really it didn't get the point across, right? So now we have actionable things, and it starts with account inventory. And it's been really hard, and we're able to finally get that through in my current role, and it's just really changed the game. MFA everything, multi-factor everything if you can. My wife hates it. She thinks it's just such a silly thing. But I have 1Password. I MFA everything. If there was something to happen to me, she would have access to all my accounts because she has my information, right? Because she's my wife. That makes sense, right? And I kind of think of cloud security the same way. If I MFA everything, I want people to struggle. I want people to be unable to access the thing. My wife's different, obviously, because she's my wife. But at the same time, like when it comes to this stuff, it should be such a pain to get into these accounts. We've been challenged that at various roles. Why do I need MFA? It slows my development process, blah, 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 whatever it is. But really, in today's landscape, if you're not MFA and everything as much as you can, you're doing it wrong. Logging, I've always said, in my opinion, if a log doesn't exist, then it never actually happened. And the reason I say that is because if someone said that they did something X, Y, and Z, and I don't have a log for it, or it's not being pushed to the right place, okay, great. Well, I can't prove that you did it. I can't get you fired. I can't do this X, Y, and Z. Or there's a cloud architectural kind of discussion where cloud architects are building something incorrectly, and they're not factoring in auditing and logging, which again, I know Brian is in the room, and that's literally what he does. So at the end of the day, if you don't have that, it didn't happen, and it's hard for those folks to really prove that something should be changed. Restrict API access. Again, role-based access, or RBAC, permission cloud providers. That's easier said than done, I will say, because there's a lot of things to restrict that. But again, it starts with the identity, right? Ryan doesn't need admin to everything. Even though I'm security, I'm the top dog. I don't need to be able to delete an account. Sorry. I shouldn't be able to do that. I want to. The old self, I want to, because I hate having millions of accounts. We have thousands of accounts. I still don't know why. But at the same time, like, that's not my decision, right? I have to think about how can I protect this in the best way? The best way is to start with, okay, you're a developer, you have this tiny amount of access. If you're an admin for an account, you're still not going to get admin. You're going to be a power user or something, just a defined role. So like in my current role, we have about 7 roles that everyone has. Security can pretty much do everything except delete, modify, change, transfer, those types of things where it shows that we're trying to manipulate something. Initially, when I started, there was like, I don't even want to say there was an insane amount of admins that could literally delete or do anything in these accounts, and we've stopped that. So it really just comes down to, look what all these people are doing. Look at all these bad things that are happening. Why are people spending up hundreds of thousands of resources? Once we started talking about money, our leadership really started to listen. Another thing, restrict all resources and access that users do not. I already said that. And use an external identity provider. Don't rely on AWS. Don't rely on AWS SSO, for example. You always want to have a third party. You want to have a GUI. As much as people don't like GUIs, you have to have a GUI for IAM. You have to. SailPoint is a good one. Other one, I've used Duo in the past. I've used Ping Identity. That one was kind of not my favorite. Other ones, Microsoft Azure is great for enterprise. Only if you have AD. If you don't have AD, good luck. But again, Azure kind of does that by design. The last one, or this other one, scan for vulnerabilities, misconfigurations in the cloud, virtual machines, cloud regularly. It's kind of where Wiz.io that came in. There's obviously other tools that I've used, Callus, Tenable, Rapid7. I mean, there's just so many of them, and they're all just kind of clunky enterprise level. And really, Wiz.io just goes right into the API and checks the API, which again, management plane, right? That was directly integrated from our kind of higher overlords at Cisco. And we pushed for it because as cloud security engineers, we need a way to give actionable things to teams through tickets and stuff like that and say, look, why isn't this track team doing this X, Y, and Z thing and fixing this vulnerability? It's been 6 months. Well, Ryan, where's the ticket? Oh, look at all these tickets. As soon as we have that, people start to listen. And it's been really nice to see that in the last couple of years that I've been there. Again, audit everything. If there's a log that didn't happen, I just say that again. I probably mentioned it a million times. The weird thing about the cloud providers is it's not on by default. Kind of weird, but the reason it is because it costs money. There's an AWS called CloudTrail, and then there's CloudWatch logs. So CloudWatch logs normally come from the EC2 instance, so a virtual machine. They come from containers, they come from other places. CloudTrail is really checking the APIs, but you normally have to forward them somewhere. I've used a lot of SIMs. Splunk is the biggest one, not my first choice. I've used QRadar in the past, not my second choice or first choice. I want to use a simpler tool. I wish there was better tools, kind of like Wiz, honestly. That'd be great. But again, we still have to prove that a log exists. We have to keep them for a certain period of time for certain compliance requirements like HIPAA. That was a big one I did at my hand when I was working in East Lansing. And we had to keep everything for so long. So like 7 or 8 years or something. So that's, again, you kind of have to have something like Splunk to do that. I won't go through this. This is kind of architect for failure again. It's cloud security in a way because we work with cloud security architecture, but my field is really cloud security engineering. Cloud architecture really designs this, and we kind of implement it from a technical level. I won't go into that. I'm sure everyone has seen that fire dog, which is funny because it happens every day. We'll kind of go through this just a little bit, see what time we got. Yeah, we'll kind of speed this up a little bit. So there is free tiers for each environment. So it kind of gives you free time to check in, AWS, Azure, GCP. You can sign up. You do have to have a credit card in case you do use something that isn't free. But I've done this with my students, and none of them have issues. I force them to kind of create an account because it's really good for them. And then they're kind of, I let them know, hey, this is what's free, this is what's not. And I think everyone knows the free real estate guy. And I say for a time, sort of, because again, you have to be careful. Now I'm like, hey, I'm ready to deploy something to the cloud, not yet. You kind of have to know, in my opinion, Cloud Security Alliance. I've used it in past roles, and it's really a good thing to, from a simple standpoint, understand what, the best benchmarks are. So CSA has 14 domains that are related to cloud security. That was kind of the data security, availability, stuff like that, where you can kind of easily translate stuff to technical requirements. In my opinion, it's easier than NIST. It's easier than HIPAA, High Trust, even, which was a HIPAA framework that I used before. But again, Cisco uses NIST in certain ways. We have our own internal policies. I would just rather use this. I'd rather use a neutral vendor and just be done with it, but that's just not how the world works, especially with bigger companies. But if I had my way, I would just use this process, because we used this at my hand with High Trust, and it was just a good learning experience, and it just made a lot of sense to make things really easy for leadership and for technical requirements. And again, neutrality in cloud security and public cloud is extremely important. So we'll just like I said, we're going to kind of look at each console and just kind of see what you see. So here's the console for AWS. It really assumes a lot. It assumes that you know what you're doing, and it assumes you know what a virtual machine is, build an app. Like, you can just click a button, look, 6 minutes, boom, got Elastic Beanstalk, got Lightsail. It assumes a lot. And that's where you can come into money and come into issues, stuff like that. So it's a little scary sometimes. Azure is like, hey, go to learn. It's a little more nonchalant, but these kind of made more sense, right? There's devices, virtual machines. It's a little easier to understand at a high level. Again, I like to just explain this to everyone, because you can click around. That's kind of why I'm saying, like, you can click around, you can go to information free, right? You can do a lot of things, and it's like they kind of assume a lot. So it is dangerous to be in a public cloud, which is why if you don't need to be in a cloud, don't be in a cloud. GCP, again, kind of weird as well. This is my own account from a while ago. And I'm just like, look, resources, right? Kind of makes sense. Project info, what is that? Project number kind of makes sense. But again, they all kind of use similar terms to reference an account. Basically, a project is an account. An AWS ID account number is an account. Azure has subscription. I don't know why, but they do. So again, just you want to be aware of that. And again, if I had my way, it would just kind of be more considerate and more concise. But this is kind of why I do these kind of presentations too, because I want to learn. I want to have people have the opportunity to learn and realize that, look, maybe not everyone understands what a project is or a resource is, right? So it makes it kind of more a human element as well. So again, how do you protect each of them? MFA, password complexities. We keep hearing password lists. That's happening, but it's kind of there. It's kind of not. It really depends on who you ask and what company you deal with. I've kind of touched these. Again, use an identity provider. Just kind of reiterating what I was saying. Again, they all have the ability to use elasticity and agility. So elasticity just means you can spin up something quickly, and you can use it from a global and disaster recovery application level. Again, nothing's on by default. It's not going to build it for you. The public cloud providers don't care if their region goes down, and your application goes down. If you didn't build for DR, they really don't care. And I think that's a misnomer as well, because a lot of times it's really not on AWS. I've only seen, in the 8 years or so that I've been doing, I've only seen an actual outage that was caused by AWS, and it was for like 20 minutes. So in summary, I think I made this meme specifically for this. Cloud security, I'm in a dark corner, and my developers and sales are just loving it. They're just selling stuff. They're blowing it up. I see it every day. It blows my mind, especially today. I was very frustrated today. And it's just like, I don't know how people, especially bigger companies, it's been very eye-opening. But I wouldn't do anything else. I think the first thing is be open and collaborative with people, because if you can't talk to your developers and try to get them to kind of get to a better state progressively, you're not going to do it. You can't fix everything day one. If you're like, hey, why are you doing it this way? Why are you doing it that way? Why are you doing it this way? They're going to shut down and never talk to you again. I've had teams do that before, track teams, which when I say track team is really an application team. So again, Cloud security only happens if the business realizes more work will happen if cloud security is not baked in from the start. So that kind of comes back to, making sure that when something's deployed, we say, look at all these problems. Here's the proof that these problems are happening. It's not just us being jerks. It's literally an application showing that all these vulnerabilities, all these risks are there. What do you want to do about it? And then we get direction on it. So it's really just kind of making sure that people understand that. The cloud must start with a proper IAM strategy. And must restrict, I didn't spell that right, that's okay. And must be to a least privilege, no exceptions list, which when I started over 2 years ago, it was like Wild Wild West. Now it is extremely, stringent. I started that process before the IAM team. Now we have an entire team that leads it. And, I couldn't be any more grateful with that because we've been able to shut that down. And now very few people can actually do anything destructive or without proper oversight, at least from an identity perspective. And that's what, not necessarily from a process and procedure, but at least from an identity perspective, where if one person is doing something they shouldn't, we will have a log of it. Again, audit configurations, as I mentioned a million times, I'll do it again. And again, don't rely on the cloud provider to protect your applications or developer or infrastructure team as they design that will fail. So I've seen where one person or 5 people are always a contact for something that will fail. You just want to make sure that there is a processed queue at least for non P1 level, so super important critical issues, because they will be forgotten. So, but like stuff that you need to be woken up on, have a process in place like pager duty. We've set that up multiple different roles where it wakes you up in the middle of the night. Make sure you have that because you want to make sure that those things are happening. I say have fun, think cloud first, cloud security first, just because if you think that way, what's the best way you can do it the first time? And then finally, learn Terraform. Just try to learn it, whatever you can do. Connect with me on LinkedIn, misec Discord or EMU Discord. And I'm happy that I was finally able to after several, I think it's been a couple of years, I've been able to do this in person and actually give a talk. So thank you.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan. I noticed, I think at one point I saw battery savers on, so I don't know if you are about to die on your laptop.
Oh, yeah.
I've had a couple questions, but I don't want to.
Yeah, let's see if I can save it real quick.
To lose everything midstream.
Yeah, which I'm actually surprised that it actually lasted. So that's nice.
That is good. All right.
There you
Cool. So we had one question in the Discord, which was, who is your daddy and what does he do? Which, of course, but so I'm curious about a few things myself.
Sure.
Obviously, I kind of dabble in this stuff, but looking at this as an intro, right? If I'm a sysadmin, are there resources that I can go look at to learn more about any of those particular cloud providers? Because I'm looking at GCP, and I actually have limited experience with GCP, and that the interface to me was non-intuitive, completely. So are there places I can go learn more about those things? Like if my place of business, where I'm an intern or whatever right now, let's say, wants to move something to GCP or Azure or AWS or IBM, are there resources I can turn to for those specific kinds of things? Or
yeah, I mean, are you looking for training?
Yeah.
So I mean, my recommendation is a Cloud Guru. That's literally how I've passed all my certs and learned anything. It has hands-on labs. It shows you the basics, and it allows you to, pass a course. Or I've had students where they take my course at EMU and they pass the basic certification level for AWS. So I mean, it's really just about having access to an account. I mean, anyone can sign up. I know if you work for certain companies, they'll like. I'm sure MSU, I'm sure EMU. I know EMU has free credits. Like for example, I'm the guy who contacted AWS and for EMU, and they'll say, yeah, you're an EDU. Oh yeah, we'll give you a bunch of money. Yeah. And they gave me free credits and free accounts. So I'm sure they'll do the same thing for you and your team. simply because that's what they do. They want, especially EDUs, to take advantage of their services.
Yeah.
And especially if they get wind of it, they will do anything to get you in a room to train your team.
I have,
probably for free.
I have experienced this. Yeah.
Probably for free. I know my current role, we've had that where we were looking into GCP, and literally everyone coming out of the woodworks was like, yeah, we'll teach you, we'll do whatever you need to do. And now we have an environment and a couple of use cases in GCP. So just do a Cloud Guru is a great website. I think they were bought by Pluralsight, so honestly, some EDUs may already have access to that in some ways.
Yep.
I know currently they don't have that content on Pluralsight though.
Okay.
But again, I would recommend, just because even Pluralsight has some really good stuff too. But yeah, just dabble with it. Anyone can create an account, do it for free to a certain extent. And like I said, I think all of my students maybe spend $1 or $2, if anything, in my course. So, just depends on what you want to learn.
Sure.
So what do you teach at
I teach Intro to Cloud Security.
Is it just that one course then?
So I've taught, they're all electives right now, so they're not in any necessarily handbook. But yeah, so they're at the master's level. So there's a cybersecurity degree over there as well. And then there's a Bachelor in Information Systems bachelor degree that it's part of. So we're trying to get it incorporated into the degree. So it can be a required elective, or it can be part of the degrees. That's obviously always completely out of my hands. The dean knows, and hopefully that's going to happen. I think the next time I will teach it is this next semester too. So I normally teach it every winter or every fall, but not this fall. But normally every winter I teach it.
Okay.
But yeah, feel free, anyone, to reach out on LinkedIn as well, and I can get you into the EMU Discord. If you actually go to EMU, or MSU, I can let you know which program I'm taking here too. And it's been nice to finally have a program at a huge university like MSU that actually is relevant to my technical daily job. So that's good to see, because again, EMU is very technical focused, much smaller than MSU, obviously. And it shows in some cases, but again, they're different universities. MSU's research primarily, and I would consider EMU more of a trade school.
Sure. Cool. All right.
Is there anything on the stream there, Nick?
Oh, I've just been adding stuff for us. For example, I just linked up where to find your LinkedIn at, and we can at least have that shown in the show notes. I've also shared what is also, again, earlier you mentioned a Cloud Guru as a good example. Hi.
So turn on my camera here. Yeah. So yeah, Cloud Guru is a great one. Got here. Cloud Guru, honestly, hands down, best training I've ever done in my entire career. They have stuff for everything as well.
Yeah, it was pretty expansive. It was like I was checking it out. It was like Ansible. It was like
they have everything. They have everything. I think Puppet was Chef. I'm sorry, was the first kind of infrastructure as code, but then Terraform just kind of took it to a whole new level as well.
Yeah, I saw them actually offering Terraform also on there too. And since that was one of the things you mentioned that actually needs to be kind of like a big high priority, that kind of is kind of helpful.
Yeah.
Is Terraform how you? How do I want to ask this? So if I'm a new customer coming to you at Cisco, almost had a guess there. And I say, hey, I want to port my applications to the cloud, right? I'm running on-prem, it's costing me too much money and whatever.
Right.
Are you using Terraform to build that out? I've heard of Terraform. I'm completely unfamiliar with it.
Yeah. So kind of think of it like this. So Terraform is the infrastructure as code that controls the infrastructure. So virtual machine, database, whatever it is. Virtual private cloud, VPC is what they call it in AWS, but again, Azure says something different. GCP calls it something different. So they call it different things. So it really starts with, hey, where's your GitHub? Where does that code live? And then they say, okay, what credentials are you using? So that's kind of where the IAM process is extremely important and extremely misconfigured all the time. I'm even guilty of that because, again, I'm not a developer by trade, but, we're trying to figure out ways to manage it. So we use methods like SailPoint and CyberArk is another one, another big vendor that we but they're more enterprise. So they really don't work in a cloud environment. So we're kind of doing ways to get around that, right? So we take GitHub code that Cisco owns internally, for example, or other companies, and we kind of take that information and say, okay, what do you want us to build, or what do you want us to oversight? So we don't necessarily build the resources, we don't own the resources, but we kind of govern how they process and build the code. So we make sure that it's ran through tools like TFSec, which is an open source tool that checks for vulnerabilities on the Terraform code. Because again, Terraform's new from 2014, and there's already thousands of vulnerabilities on it. So if you don't build it the right way, it has to be checked. So there's various compliance requirements as well. So there's just a plethora of here's the code, here's how we deploy it, here's our specific use case. And it can be written in anything, right? So you can do TypeScript, you can do Java, you can do whatever. Yeah. But then at the back end, there's actually the infrastructure that says, okay, here's the EC2 tied to this deployment, application that, deploys it to a URL or something, or a load balancer on the cloud, or with a WAF in front of it. So, I mean, we don't, like I said, and that's really where the difficult part is like, who owns that, right? Who owns that process? And we technically don't own the infrastructure itself. Like, we don't say, hey, this actually is too much money. Like, we don't care about that. Yeah. It's really like, what's your use case? How do you want to build it? And then, cloud architecture says, here's how you should build it. Security engineering comes in and says, actually, this is how you would technically build it to secure it. And that really is where the crux of all the issues comes, because it's really like, how quickly can we deploy it? Why is there time traps? Why is there issues with things? Why isn't this working? That sort of thing. I don't have access, for example. So it really just depends on the use case. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of, at a basic term, how it works.
Well, I'm hearing a bunch of noise on the hall. I'm thinking maybe we might have to go with this room at 7.
Yeah, sounds good.
I think
probably got to run away.
You got to run away. Yeah. So thank you very much, Ryan, for your time, for coming out and doing this. I'm not able to come out and do this too.
Yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, we should do this again and build some kind of Q&As and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. Or we could even do like a building, like showing of Terraform actually in action.
Yeah, we can do that as well. We can set that up, and if people are interested, let me know, and
that would be a cool workshop, I think. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right, kiddos.
Awesome.
Thanks everybody. Have a good day. Thanks, everybody, for joining the MySec YouTube channel. We're about to go off. Have a good night, okay? See ya.